Welcome to another session from the Wise Asylum. Good grief. What, summer solstice blags? Have you ever seen so many blags? There's been more blags in this last week than soft mic. It's just ridiculous, to be honest. I mean, and let's look at the submarine. What's that all about? What is that all about? Well, it's a shit show, in all truth. And two possible reasons. Well, one reason, but two possible whys, and that is, on the one hand, they don't want people going down to the Titanic because they might see something. And if they might see something, it might out a super blag that we carried out a long time ago. And so that's in two parts. Either it's been mentioned that there are a serial number on the ship that will show that it's not the Titanic, it's actually the sister ship. So that fits with the blag for the shift for insurance purposes. But also that if people could see it on the bottom, they'd actually see that it was not an iceberg that did the damage, but an explosion, which again was reported by some of the survivors after the event. Either way, the best way to stop people from going down there and that trick being outed would be to stop people going in there. Well, of course, it's international waters. Well, the UN have they've just agreed, haven't they, to nick it, the UN. So just in time, UN agrees to nick all the oceans and the seas for it needs it, because it's amazing. And lo and behold, an event, and now the UN can go, well, we have to stop these dangers. Which would mean nobody's died. It's all a big con. And more than likely, these people that were cited as being on the ship have either been popped off with the old juice or they're moving into another caricature as they play within the world of all things intelligence. So I thought that, yeah, worth a bit of a scoot. Then you've got, oh my god, what's happened to Vlad the Impaler? It looks like he's tripped up on his pike. Again, what is that nonsense? How can you go from being the guy's pit bull to all of a sudden turning on him and marching to within 150 miles of Moscow? Things are not quite, doesn't seem right there. There's something else going on, either that we don't know about because the media's not telling us, or it's just another shit show. It's a setup from the get-go, because in the background we've got blame for what's just happened for the last 3 years shifting all over the show again. Fluidity on the blame game, they like that kind of stuff. But the big agricultural chemical giant companies, Big Agro I think they call it, or Big Agra, have pretty much been handed massive swathes of land in Ukraine for GMO crops. Is that what they're doing in Holland? The full control of the land, so they can, if it's got to be growing, which, and it does, and of course in Ukraine it does, biggest supplier of wheat is Ukraine. Then you need to control farming and the land, wouldn't you, to get these GMO products growing. I mean, you look at a lot of the stuff they're offering, if there's one thing that's causing damage to everybody, and I mean everybody, because it affects the liver in the first instance, it's any oil made from seeds. Seeds are full of lectins, which is nature's way of protecting the seed, which when it's ingested by us, or even the animals, turns to estrogen. And of course in the males, it's turning into a woolly woofter. And for the females, because of course they've got plenty of estrogen, the body then starts to create fat to store the toxin. Once the body is too full or unable to get rid of it, because the main thing that it's affecting is the liver, and it's giving everybody fatty liver disease. So everything that you're buying that's takeaway is cooked in that oil, isn't it? Oil from seeds. I did a video on the old cooking that I do, and I use, to start off, because of course you can't use olive oil in a frying pan, because if it gets too hot it can be carcinogenic, I've been told. So I start off anything like that with a big blob of beef dripping and a big blob of butter, and then I'll mix up whatever spices and flavours I want to put in that mix, and then stick the meat in. and then I'll add my veg and as we go, and different spices, or not so much spices, but different herbs at different periods in the mix, because I don't want to cook certain things. And the last going in is the ginger, fresh ginger, not the powder but fresh ginger cut. And you don't want to cook that at all because you want the full value of that. So that's how I do it, without using vegetable oil. And your body, you will notice that your body appreciates it if you cook anything in a manner that doesn't use, in any way, shape or form, seed oil. And a lot of this stuff that they're going to be offering up to the old vegans is, I think I've seen an avocado made entirely on rapeseed oil. So what are they doing? They're just going to annihilate your liver. Now this information, they understood this information when, during the 80s and the 90s, you know, the wealthy, who were eating the best of the best, everything that you'd expect, were all turning up with fatty liver disease, and that's where they worked out that it was actually using the seed oil. So it's really important that you understand that, because it's in everything. Crisps, what are crisps made out of? Seed oil. You're eating a bag of crisps and you don't realise the damage you're doing to your liver because they've been cooked in seed oil. And that's right through everything. And you've got to look in all processed food. You'll find seed oil. So if people can get a grip of that and understand that is a serious problem and a big cause of a lot of conditions, that once you've gone into the arena, it's never ever never mentioned that that's going to be a part of it, because of course they want to diagnose you in a manner that means that they can offer you the happy pill, the happy juice, whichever it is they make the most cash on. So, taking care of your temple. This is how you do it. Understand what these particular products are actually doing to you. Or, not necessarily the product, but the ingredients in all the products. Because, you know, they've got this kind of stuff. You're getting a hit of it from everything. Your liver doesn't stand a chance. And if your liver doesn't stand a chance, then no organ in your body stands a chance. You know, so you've got to focus and medicate if you're on the old... you know, synthetic stuff, which most people are. That is clogging your liver up to death. What I use is milk thistle. Now, I did a session about 5 or 6 weeks ago, maybe more. And I took 2 sessions within a week, in a couple of days apart. Then within 3 weeks, bang. Twice did I let a lot of shit out, toxins. Right, yeah? And it showed itself in blood, believe it or not. So most people would have shit themselves then and been off to doctors and been told they had something else, when really all that was the consequence of me taking the milk thistle, and there, obviously a lot of shit needed to come out of that liver, and it did. Now, why can I say that it comes out of the liver? Because the milk thistle has one job, and what it does is activates the bile ducts, and without the bile ducts working, the toxins are not being squirted out into your old poo chute. So again, that's an important thing you have to recognise. So I did what I did. Within 3 weeks, that happened. So you've got to be ready for something to happen if you're going to do that. Now, the one thing to be careful of with milk thistle is it does heat the liver, which I felt as it did it. You can feel it. It's not an uncomfortable sensation per se, but it is a sensation. You know, let's just say your body focuses your mind to your liver. You know that something's going on there. So what it actually does is heats it up. Now, you don't want too much heat in your liver, so you have to be a little bit, you know, test the water first if you're going to have a bash at that. But you clean your liver, you're cleaning your blood, you're cleaning your organs, you're cleaning cells, you're cleaning everything. You know, not just, well, eat this thing here, but fill that up there with garbage, which is exactly what's happening if you go to the snake juices. So keep that in mind, but I don't know how the hell I've got onto that. But we were talking about Vlad the Impaler. I mean, if that's not a load of garbage, I don't know what is. It doesn't happen. It's happened another event, a blag on the solstice. What else have they done? They've hiked the interest rates. Another hit. What else have they done in this week? Quite a lot, in truth. But there were one other thing I wanted to speak about, but I forgot what it were. So, anyway, never mind that. Who's here? What you saying? Paul says, good evening, Sean, everyone. Good evening to you, Paul. Untitled said, hello, Sean, everyone. Good evening to you. Untitled. Kel says, man, I got a red light near IR light. If anyone has systematic pain or medical conditions, get one and give it a go. Huge health effects. And what's that called? A red light near IR light. You might have to give us a bit more data on that, Kel, because we're not too sure what you mean. Kel says again, Schumann resonance has been off the chart. Yeah, seen that's another. Saw that. Interesting, because just having a little look, search around on that particular point, as I did earlier in the week. So there was one guy who were obviously a boffin, excited about it, never been witnessed before. It went off the Richter scale. Now, what is that Schumann resonance? That is the frequency upon that the Earth is currently resonating at. So it's been stable for God knows how long. But all of a sudden, in sync with huge sun spots and what do they call them? Them, for want of a better word. So he was talking about saying that when you've studied any of the Eastern stuff and they're talking about third dimension moving into or closer to the fourth, lower fourth, the fifth, etc., then that would be something you'd expect to physically be able to register. So it was interesting. Now I've thought back to the weekend and I couldn't think that I had any major sort of extra feelings or insights or any such thing like that. But obviously if the Schumann changes, the dance changes and everything on this earth will dance to that shift. But I couldn't sort of pinpoint anything that made me think, well, that were a bit odd. So I can't say that I had any physical recognition of the fact that that's what happened. But he was saying sort of, is this what the elite are doing? Or they know that this shift is going on. We looked at last week the possibility that it's because they're trying to save their world, but there's something going to take place that even they can't control, which is why they're doing what they're doing under what they call the reset. That's a feasible option. So he's basically suggesting that it is upon such that will change us in that respect, that as the Schumann resonance shifts, so too all life on the earth. Now, what have they just done? Have they prevented folks from actually achieving that shift consciously? It's not actually going to give them the benefits that one would expect if you up the frequency, which is actually how I've always understood meditation. You're actually just moving yourself through different frequency vibrations, and if you're training your conscious mind then to actually be aware of the difference, the different input, influence, intuition, whatever. So I thought that was quite interesting, that they might be onto something there, but apparently that's never happened before, or it's not been recorded. But it definitely took place. So the sun's obviously activating again, that's going on. But yeah, interesting. I were on that and had a good look. Cos says, sup Sean and chat, have you seen that lab-grown chicken? Looks like a massive booger. Ooh, does it? What have they grown it out of? Don't tell me. Seed oil. I won't be surprised. They just seem to be throwing everything on. You want to get everybody on the seed oil so they can just annihilate your liver, which is going to then, as you're going to actually be worth something to them, because you're going to be getting their happy juice and pills and such. So interesting. Kel says coconut smokes a bit, but it's good top stuff otherwise. Well, I think the key with these oils that you keeping away from the seed oils is not all the oils are good at high temperature. Maybe coconut oil is not what you want to be starting off anything fried or anything that's going to require it to get too hot. But I will say to you, beef dripping and butter, and just butter if you like, just butter, but I think the beef dripping gives it that little extra. I don't like lard because it stinks. I just don't like touch of it. I don't like the smell of it. But beef dripping is just delicious all round. And then butter, if you want it to taste a bit more butter, add that to your thing. But those two substances, I've no problem with that eat. So then I'll add, sometimes I'll make a stir fry and it'll be a bit dry towards, you make your 10 minutes in, it's just a little bit dry. So I either put butter in, or I'll put some olive oil in, or I'll do both. But I know at that point then, it's not steaming hot, and most of the olive oil just actually, it goes on the food itself, so it's not gonna get too hot. Maybe you could try that with a coconut oil, I don't know. I've never actually cooked with coconut oil. Cos says 2 eyeballs and more lips. Kel says fill liver a teaspoon of olive oil in a shot glass, cayenne pepper, lemon juice and turmeric and shoot it. Well, I've never done that, but I do know the milk thistle works. But just be prepared to see things, what it's going to get out in your feces, and don't poo your pants. Because it was happening to me, and I told a couple, and they were shitting there. They're looking at me like, "Oh my kid, you're going to die." And I'm like, no, I know it was a detox. And it happened twice, and that's it, doesn't it? And you feel better. I did a load of beetroot. I thought, I'm going to do some beetroot. So I did about 4 days just pounding beetroot. Wow, what a massive difference to your colon. It just changes everything. And just to do these things to you, because it's a superfood, isn't it? A bit like spinach if you wash it or soak it in apple cider vinegar overnight. Because obviously they got everybody excited about spinach, so they attack spinach. That's the way they play it. You're aware of that, it's fine. You can either not eat the spinach until they calm down on it and they stop bothering about it because they're doing something else, or soak it overnight in cider vinegar. And you'll see it come out in the morning. If they've got the glyphosate on, it comes off like a gel shite on the top. Just pour that off and rinse them, and you know you've got it off. Then it's okay to eat. But obviously, if you can source any veg that isn't. So, for instance, I've been having a plethora of strawberries, homegrown, in this week. Amazingly delicious. They taste totally different than what you get on the supermarket. Even though the supermarkets are huge, but bright red, they do not taste the same as them grown in the old garden, because there's nothing untoward stuck on them. So or they're not GMO. Again, we don't even know half what's GMO these days doing. Olive oil makes it so the cayenne pepper isn't hot. Well, peppers and such, they make your blood get warm anyway. I have to be careful I don't let my blood get too hot. That's when you can blow the world up, kind of thing. So I don't do curries because I'm not big on the old spicy stuff. I'll use bits in my stir fries, but it's so minimal. Unless I want some, and then I'll put a little bit more or something in. But on general terms, I keep off the spicy stuff. So I don't know about that, Kel, but if it works, it works. Ghee is really good also. Yeah, I've also heard that ghee isn't dangerous, as in it's not a seed oil. It's very greasy, isn't it, ghee? Because we have all eaten Indians. But you get to see, because I used to do a lot of work where there were grants in 80s, and a lot of the Asians used to cook for us. They'd make you a meal. And what they cook in their homes is nothing like what you get at any of the takeaways, I can assure you. Nothing like it. And there is a lot of ghee in it. But by all accounts, it doesn't actually do any harm. It's much better than any seed oil that you can buy, and that's in everything. But basically, if you approach processed food in that it's got it in it, something in there has been cooked in it, or it's put it in it, and lower that intake, and you'll pull your liver back. You're pulling your kidneys back because you're allowing your body to detox. If you've got kidney stones, we went through that when we used to do the cold peppers, which I think I'll start to do again as we get into the autumn. there were lots of remedies in what we covered there specifically for kidney stones and all stones that you know build up in the body. So there's all sorts of ways to attack this stuff without needing the juice brigade. But it's up to you, isn't it? Are you going to take control and be your own doctor? That's what it's about, isn't it? Or you're not. Then you're going to have to listen to them that you go to. Graham B's transparency, strawberry, raspberry, blueberry leaves also make a tea. Interesting, and welcome, Graham. G is clarified butter. Is it? Well, that's interesting. I didn't know that. Thanks for that. I mean, it does have a nice taste. And nobody that eats curries is going to disagree, are they? Nobody. And stinging nettle too. Oh, stinging nettle, this is absolutely amazing stuff. So is the dandelion. I mean, now, first thing they do in spring, everybody's out pulling up the dandelions. Well, they're the first things to come out for the bees. So we shouldn't really be doing that. We shouldn't be mowing our lawns, or at least getting rid of all the dandelions until the flowers have started in the wild or even in your garden. Otherwise, you're depriving the bee of its first take of pollen. So yeah, but all these things that they classed as weeds, in many cases, are just really, really good for you. Which we did see when we were going through all the culpepper. And I think I will start that again and again in the autumn. Right. So last week's live were a bit, covered some interesting topics. And I just thought to myself, when we're looking at what's going on, we only ever look at it from the biblical perspective. Everybody does. Because that's the major theme that's running Judaism, Christianity and Islam. So whenever you're looking for the enemy, you're looking for reason and blah, 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 most people's vision is looking out there with the biblical tradition as the edit. And of course then anything outside the biblical edit is classed as pure evil, Satan, and they should be shot. It's not really the case, is it? It's just lots of hoity-toits. Back in the day, as they found new data, oh, that's disgustingly wrong, we need to set up a new idea, because we know the crack. So there's a lot of that goes on, isn't there? But specifically, very few people get into, well, where are the secret societies? Where are they at in their mindset? Because they're not seeing it purely from biblical terms. Because, of course, their ancestors went hoity-toiting after the old Crusades, nicking data, nicking magical systems, antediluvian knowledge, etc., etc. And of course a lot of artifacts that would probably have still held a connection to some of the entities, demonic or whatever, from back in those times. So that's what they were up to, getting new data. It comes, it causes all the havoc, doesn't it? Because this church has been set up, and basically all this data that they're collecting is basically saying, look, you've been telling fibs. That's not what happened. That's not how it happened. What's going on? And of course then you get But I thought, let's have a look at it from their perspective, because there's a lot of people operating these secret societies, and they're operating on scripts that are just as adhesive to your mind as the biblical tradition is to most. So I thought we'll have a little venture into that, because I've made it plain many times, in my opinion. All things changed once the Merovingians were pretty much supplanted by the Carolingians. Because of course, to get a real input into, let's start as a sort of as early on as we can. But the Merovingians, okay, huge swathes of Europe were under the Merovingians. They did a split and turned east-west. We know that today as France and Germany, okay? So one block divided and both evolved to be France and to be Germany. So that's what happened with the Franks, the Merovingians. Now, the Carolingians took over through Charles Martel, and Charlemagne when we had a big threat from the Moors, or the Islamists as were, or those that were formed from the Phoenicians from the base in Carthage, which is where you get the mix of slavery and all that malarkey. They moved up into Spain and then became a threat. So in came Charles Martel, and then we get on to Charlemagne. And what you've got building there then is something separate from the church, but then not really. Separate from the church, but not separate from the Holy See bloodlines, as we know it today, as we've discussed many times. So it's the Holy See, the bloodlines, creating something else. And they're creating these knightly orders. But, interesting, just absorbed myself in this data this week. What I found is that it's been written that the Knights Templar were actually created 7 years before it is officially presented, and they were actually formed in Constantinople. So not even Romanic, not from Western Rome, entirely created and thus an arm of certain bloodlines that were in then Constantinople. Now, just back to the Franks, we're still dealing with Scythians. The entire white race, basically, whether you're blonde-haired, blue-eyed, whether you're red-haired, green-eyed, all your shades of white honky, which we are, and we're all happy to be, are basically Scythians, or Saka, the Saka. Now, the Saka gave you the doctrines that became Buddhism. Well, to form something not really how it should be, but the Saka created the Buddha was of the Saka. You've got Jesus of the Saka. You've got the Druid system that was burgeoning in British Isles, headed in Ireland. For me, the Merovingians, when I've studied them, I pretty much operated a very similar way to how they did. Just by, not because I'm copying, but that's what I've done for many years, and when I started to study them, realised, well, hang on a minute, it's not new. This is normal. It used to be normal. So I would suggest that the Merovingians were the remnants of what was before Rome got involved and created a church, etc., etc. So it were probably the biggest remaining body of Scythians that were still operating according to the original Druid system. And that's getting divided up. It's getting divided up because there's conflicts going on here and everywhere. Now, the other guys involved in this we know as the Venetians, because they've been a potent power of ill will to everybody since the fall of Rome. But maybe not since the immediate fall of Rome. It probably took them a few centuries to actually build Venice. Because when Rome fell, a particular branch of senator bloodlines shifted to Venice. That same bunch had come in from Carthage or Tyre when Alexander the Great sacked it. So they moved. So the Republic were created, the Roman Republic, by Scythian bloodlines, a mixture. Your Trojans, all part of the Scythian race. Your Greeks, your Athenians, before the Greeks that we know today, they were all Scythians, especially your Athenians. So we're seeing that mix of race of people were the antediluvian Atlanteans, or a big chunk of it. Yeah. So again, that's why we're finding white honkies as pharaohs before the Sumerians pretty much bagged it. But then there's even, it could even be so that the Anunu were white honkies as well. Yeah. So basically, wherever you find white honky, you'll find civilization. You find these ideas, and along with that, you find this dark part that doesn't like them and wants to annihilate them at all points because they're a block to them taking power. And of course, you find that these other races are very low grade. They think low. It's very tiny, the little bubble, and they're very fixed in the animal nature side of man. So you've got the low nature. So you could say the two low chakras connected to the eye complex, they live in that bubble only. So it's fight, feed, and sex. That's basically the paradigm for the baser nature of man. Then you've got the solar plexus, you've got the will that we have, yeah, and that we form. Or the secret societies would call that Lucifer, the Lucifer energy, okay? Absolute will and intellect, because it's exceptionally clever. And you've got two ideas based on actual conditions of particular humanity. So low grade, bottom end, it's all about fight, feed, conquer, and sex. So that's where your ideas of enslaving the women of your perceived enemies, that's where that comes from, that ideology, really baser system. You've got the solar plexus side of that, then as you're coming up the chakras. So again, we're referencing the alchemical Gospels, as you're raising the Christ energy up, as we've looked at all around Christmas time. But we're applying it now to, let's look at how this pans out in physical. So you've got one mindset that's just low grade or complex, that's all it does. You've the next level up, which has got the will, based on how it's controlling the lower side, depends on what is it pushing. Is it pushing that low nature? So then you get Molech, sacrificing the Kronos. That old ancient idea where it's all about killing children, sacrificing children, sustaining yourself from killing children, and all the things we know that goes in with that. So then you could say, well, where does this Druid system come in that claimed to actually have invited Jesus over with Joseph Arimathea, initiated him and taught him, and then sent him off to Palestine to preach? Yeah? Well, what is it? It depends on what you see in that, as to what the Gospels are, as to what you see, all the sorts of ideas and esotericism that comes from that. But in my opinion, I would say that's, he was the initiate and brought us the path to raise ourselves above the heart, above that horizontal block, so that you're playing with that side of the alchemical man. So in that sense, you've got a trinity. You've got three parts of what makes up man. You've got a will versus the animal nature, which is supposed to pull together. So that's both the masculine side and the feminine side of that, and pull it up above, and then you're supposed to become the super balanced, fantastic guru geezer, or such like. So if we look at it like that, then we can say that each of those three realities as a physical representation, as in a body of people, a body of religious belief, etc., and culture. We can see that as well. So, if we then transfer that to our positions and situation today, we've got secret societies. We know they divide themselves into black and white. Okay? Clear, black and white. We've now got white hats, black hats, have we not? Black knight, white knight, the checkerboard. So there are two secret society bunches. One's more into killing everything for its own ends. The other, as it pushes its will, it wants to push people to create for themselves, do things better. But obviously, if you're still stuck at that point there, you're still doing battle with this side until you push yourself up there beyond that heart chakra, because you've incorporated, you've sort of earthed those two frequency energy systems in your heart. Bang. So that's the ascended, that's the idea of ascension, isn't it? Available to us all if you put the effort in. So let's look at the secret societies. You've got clearly the Knights Templar have always said Luciferians. The Freemasons say they're Luciferian. So they're demarcating themselves in a particular energy, a particular representation or a part of man. Then you've got this darker side that we know just has to hit all things innocent children. That's all it's interested in. Everything it does, everything it creates, everything it forms is in order that they can get access to your offspring. And there you get wars, there you get famines, there you get all sorts of disasters and such that gives them the ability to put their systems in and harvest all the offspring. We do with the with organs in grown-ups now as well, so they've really come on with that. So you have two there, battling it out. And of course, to both of those, if they're fixing each side, this centrepiece is a problem. Because neither on their own can actually gain full control of everything, because of course they're missing out this part that they can't reach. And they can't reach it because they're fixed in. So naturally, over the years, over the centuries, especially in the Crusade times, they've done deals together. They've done deals together and basically moved always to cancel out the third aspect, or that ascension side in man, and fix everybody below the heart. So we've sort of looked at that stuff before, but now we can see that there's two lots of secret societies operating these two parts, and they've merged, come together, but it's at the expense of that because they're shutting it off. And I think all what we've just experienced the last 3 years is a part of that. So, with that background, let's have a little look. Here we go. It's a very interesting article. It says a different view of history. The Black Nobility. Ooh. Original article. A different view of history. The Black Nobility. And it was done 4 months ago. TCTT editor note. Sorry, it's Hive blog this. This article is an attempt to gather together in one convenient place some information in the form of articles, videos, etc. that give a different view of history as opposed to the view that the education, indoctrination system and media would have us believe. A lot of the information regarding the Black Nobility seems to come from people who believe in one religion or another. When reading, listening or viewing such material, it is a good idea to try and separate the facts and evidence from any beliefs that may have been injected into the information as much as possible. Their beliefs are of interest as it can give you a better understanding of who they are, how their minds work, and why the world is in the state it is. If you have any suggestions, have a look, blah, blah, blah. Excuse me. Now, there's a link there, Black Nobility chat. I've not looked at them, didn't have time. I've spent the whole week on this. The term Black Nobility has a far deeper significance than just noble support for the papacy, and actually stems back to the time of empires that predated ancient Rome. Before the rise of the Roman Empire as the world's dominant power in the Mediterranean, there existed a very specific cartel of oligarchical families, mainly centred on Babylon, Persia, Greece, Tyre and Phoenicia. These oligarchical families were powerful families who had significant influence in regards to commerce and trade in the areas that they resided in. It was these families who dominated maritime trade and commerce. They were the merchants of the sea. Over this period of time, there was a succession of empires as the newly emerging empire overcame the older, with the Babylonian Empire succeeded by the Medes and the Persians, who then were conquered by the Greeks, who were then conquered by the Romans. This period of world history, which encompassed around 450 years, resulted in a lot of marriages between different oligarchical families from different empires, leading to bloodlines which would share heritage from different ancestry. By the time of the Romans, much of the oligarchical families were composed of people who had ancestry which came from Phoenicia, Greece, Persia and Babylon. Well, that's not at the time of the Republic. That's what, as the Phoenicians started to enter it. So you've got Seneca, you've got Caesar. These are the big players that changed what was the Republic into this more Phoenician kind of system. By the time of the Romans, much of the oligarchical families were composed of people who had an ancestry which came from Phoenicia, Greece, Persia, Babylon, and even as far back as Egypt, and many of them eventually settled in Venice. not for a while. That was after the fall of Rome. So when Tyre fell under Alexander, a lot of the elites started to move to Rome, became senators. And then when Rome finally disintegrated, the same branch of specific families started to build Venice. So that by the time we got to the 900s, Venice had pretty much secured itself as the central banker for the then known world. We've gone through that before. The Venetian nobility are called the Black Nobility because they earned this title through dirty tricks. So when the population revolted against the monopolies in government, as anywhere else, the leaders of the uprisings were quickly seized and brutally hanged. They used secret assassinations, murder and bankrupting of opposing citizens or companies, kidnapping and rape. Although originally starting in Venice, the power of the Black Nobility extended far beyond its borders, morphing into the European Black Nobility, and today is felt in every corner of the globe. The Venetian Black Nobility series with J. Phillips Jimenez video series. For decades I have wondered who rules the world. I knew it wasn't presidents or prime ministers, and after a while I realised that bankers aren't the end, as it is those who own the banks that matter. I discovered cloaked deep in the shadows a name that reverberated through history, the Venetian Black Nobility. My guest on this incredibly deep, murky, and at times highly controversial subject is J. Phillips Jimenez. He came to the same conclusion as me after his long search to figure out who truly ran things, so his international law NGO would start making headway. As it turns out, Phillips even rubbed shoulders with a prominent member of the Black Nobility, and the encounter was not the way one might think. We discuss how many get fixated on the Khazarian Mafia, and will stop their research there, missing that they are in fact just an administrative consigliere, a convenient scapegoat class. Rather, the Black Nobility cynically used the court Jew as a sort of fence, a final defence layer to hide their dark machinations. Well, they are those who call themselves Jews, but they're the Babylonian trading system that were on the Silk Road. Although the topic discussed, well, we're not going to watch the videos obviously, but they're there for you to see. I will put this up after. Now we go to Webster G. Tarpley, who we don't hear much of these days, but Webster was big with the LaRouche Foundation, but then left when he could see that a big chunk of Germanic right-wing bunch had took it over. And I had dealings with them back in the day when I was trying to help old UK column Brian Gerrish to see the light before he went and entered with this bunch. Anyway, that didn't work. And this was a PhD address delivered to the ICLC conference near Wiesbaden, Germany, by Webster G. Tarpley in 1981, and it appeared in the Campaigner, September 1981. Webster G. is an absolutely amazing source for information. If you ever want to get into this, just seek out. And he's got a lot of books. I'm pretty sure some of the PDFs online. But Webster G. Tarpley, and I have no idea what's happened to him now, he's really good for this. He says, periods of history marked, like the one we're living through, by the convulsive instability of human institutions, pose a special challenge for those who seek to base their actions on adequate and authentic knowledge of historical process. Such knowledge can come only through viewing history as the lawful interplay of contending conspiracies, pitting Platonists against their epistemological and political adversaries. Now, the Neoplatonists, of course, were the Greek sections, and more than likely White Scythians. There is no better way to gain insight into such matters than through the study of the history of the Venetian oligarchy, the classic example of oligarchical despotism and evil outside of the Far East. Well, that's because they actually all come from the Far East. As the following story details, Venice was at the centre of efforts to destroy the advanced European civilization of the 11th and 12th centuries, and bears a crushing burden of guilt for the ascendancy of the Black Guelphs and the coming of the Black Plague. The Venetians were the intelligencers for the Mongol army of Genghis Khan and his heirs, and had a hand in guiding them to the sack of Baghdad and the obliteration of its renaissance in the 13th century. And they did that again with Iraq, didn't they? What were he doing? Saddam, he were reopening all the ancient ruins and pulling in all the relics to open it up as like a giant museum for the world to go visit. 9/11. The Venetians were the mortal enemies of the humanist Paleolog dynasties in Byzantium. They were the implacable foes of Gemistos, Plethon, Cosimo de Medici, Leonardo da Vinci, Niccolo Machiavelli, and the entirety of the Florentine Golden Renaissance, which they conspired successfully to destroy. Venetian influence was decisive in cutting off the Elizabethan epoch in England and in opening the door to lugubrious Jacobean era. But they were, it says interesting in Elizabethan epoch, but they were actually behind it as the Palavicini, because they were behind Henry VIII. They were funding Elizabeth I to build a navy to rob the Spanish galleons loaded up with South American gold. So I don't agree fully. They did end it, but they started it. So we've gone through that, haven't we, before? It says, most important, Venice is today, through its Senior Foundation and its Society European de Culture, the think tank and staging area for the Club of Rome and related deployments. Venice is the supranational homeland of the Dark Ages gang, the unifying symbol for the most extreme utopian lunatic fringe in the international intelligence community today. Saxa Coburg Gotham. This is who they are. Why does Charlie keep going to Transylvania? Yeah, that's where he went not long ago. Vlad the Impaler, that's where he comes from. It's Hungary as well, big chunks of Hungary. What have we got over here? Romania Mafia. What are they all about? Your children. Okay? They're the traffickers. A friend, Rolly Post, wrote a book just on what the Windsors were doing all over Romania over the last 20 years. We're only interested in one thing, the orphanages. And that's it. Now that we've just had here a very dubious purchase of a farm, they say by a dog like an RSPCA from Romania, and they've got this farm specifically for stray dogs in Romania to bring them over here. So that means they're building a farm area where it's going to be expected to see vans with cages. Yeah? Are you seeing how this game's going? So this guy you've just acclaimed, if you have, as a monarch, he's back in this. He's back in this. I was writing about this 20 years ago when I was making it clear that the bringing in of the Irish travellers was to create rat runs, which will be taken over by these Romanian traffickers. Alright, so I've been talking about this for a long time, it's nothing new. So this is your black nobility, and the need for your offspring to be sacrificed one way or another to their god Baal. It's happening, people, you need to see it. So in essence then, back to the secret society things, you've got the Luciferians and the Baalians, those that sacrifice to Molech. They're the two branches of the secret society madness that were formed on the back of the Crusades, the days of the Crusades, the amalgamations, the deals, the agreements, etc., etc. And then you can start to understand why the Templars were attacked. Because the Black Welfs went to war with the Hohenstaufens in Germany. The Hohenstaufens were the powerful aristocracy that were more in sync with Byzantium. So, Eastern Rome, the Black Guelphs fully supported the Pope. The Pope, therefore, was backing the Black Guelphs. So, in the battle between the Guelphs and the Ghibellines, it was the Vatican system that annihilated the Ghibellines. Now, I've heard stuff in the past to show or say that actually that the Guelphs and Ghibellines, after the Ghibellines defeated them, actually formed an agreement to work together. So there you can see Luciferians, Malachians coming together. You can go further back to this and see it in terms of Prometheus versus Kronos. Yeah? Lucifer v Satan. But Lucifer is never presented as just v Satan, it's Lucifer v Jesus. Yeah? Is that really the case? I'm not so sure it is. Because it was Satan in the desert, not Lucifer. So there's misconceptions in these names and ideas of entities that everybody's aware of, but until you get into the nitty-gritty of it, you don't actually understand what it is. And if you're coming from the biblical perspective, anything not biblical is classed as demonic. Let's have a look. Get to know Venice, then look back to the monetarist imbecility of Paul Volcker at the ideological fanaticism that radiates forth from the Bank of America, Chase Manhattan and the Bank for International Settlements, and the rest. You will recognise the unmistakable putrid stench of the Venetian Canal, where the rotting marble places of generations and parasites are corroded by the greatest cynicism and cruelty the world has ever known. In the Middle Ages, the Venetians were known as the archetypes of the parasite, the people who neither sow nor reap. For the Greeks, they were the hated frogs of the marshes. In Germany, a folktale describes the merchants of Venice as an aged pantaloon who makes his rounds robbing men of their human hearts and leaving a cold stone in their place. Now that could be a reference to the name stealing. Again, cold stone in their place, dead. What was the Venetian political intelligence method? The classical Venetian predicament is that of the weaker power attempting to play off two or more major empires. This was the case when the Venetian power was in its very infancy, and survival depended upon playing off the Longobarд kingdom of Italy against the Byzantines. This ploy was later replaced by the attempt to play the Byzantines off against the Carolingian Empire in the west, which is Charlemagne. An attempt that almost misfired when the army of Charlemagne under Pippin led siege to Venice inside its lagoons. That siege, however, was not successful. In the 11th century, the Venetians successfully incited the Norman barons operating out of Sicily. Did you hear that? The Normans. Okay. Normans are the Angevins. And the Normans, as it says here, the Venetians incited. So the Venetians were behind all that the Normans did, because of course the beneficiaries of all that the Normans did were the Venetians. So 1066 was the Venetians taking full hold of England. Okay, that's where they came in first. So they incited the Norman barons operating Sicily under Robert Guiscard to attack Byzantium, and then moved in to offer the desperate Byzantines protection. The price for that protection was indicated by the famous Golden Bull of 1082, a decree of the Byzantine Emperor by which Venice acquired tax customs, free access to the whole of the Eastern Empire, where the Greeks themselves had to pay a tax of 10% on their own transactions. Thus began a hatred for Venice among the Greek population, which persists down to this present day. In the 16th century, Venetian strategic doctrine was to play the Ottoman Turks against the Spanish and Austrian Habsburgs, and then to correct any residual strategic imbalance by playing the Habsburgs off in their turn against the French. Sometimes Venice attempted to play the Portuguese rival power off against the Dutch. Later this was expanded to include playing the Dutch against the English and the English against the French. The Venetians also goaded forces out of the east to attack Christendom. Venice was the manipulator of Saracens, Mongols and Turks, and got along with the slave trading factions in each of these groups about as well as a power like Venice could get along with anybody. In particular, the Venetians were more willing to see territory excepting Venetian territory be occupied by the Turks than any other power. Venice was thus the past master of the more exotic permutations of the solid old British divide et impera, divide and conquer. But the essence of their strategic doctrine was something more abstruse, something sometimes described as the collapse of empire scenario. Venice parasitised the decline of much larger states, a decline that Venice itself strove to organise, sometimes in a long and gradual descending curve, but sometimes in a quick bonanza of looting. Venice was reportedly confronted with the problem posed by a triumphant enemy at the height of its power, who would be perfectly capable of crushing the Serenissima in short order. This enemy had to be manipulated into self-destruction, not in any old way, but in the precise and specific way that served the Venetian interest. Does this sound impossible? They've just done it here. What is astounding is how often it has succeeded. In fact, it is succeeding in a very real sense in the world today. It's like that. The most spectacular example of Venetian manipulation of the dumb giants of this world has gone down in history as the Fourth Crusade. Now, the Fourth Crusade was interesting in that we know that the Templars earlier on had first gone in and took this, dug under the Temple Mount, and there received the first big chunk of knowledge, which obviously gave them what were required to create the banking system. Now, people are saying, well, well, the Jewish. Well, no, they weren't, were they? They were formed in Constantinople by a particular faction. Then obviously that initial influx into the Levant was serving Byzantium, not Western Rome per se. Now, let me have a look here, because there's a few things that I've made a lot of notes, you see, hopefully to just... So the Fourth Crusade was important in that that was specifically set up in order that the Teutonic Knights, the Neoplatonists, and the Knights Templar, Hospitallers, etc., etc., would go in to the Holy Land. But the way the Venetians played it and how they had control is that they were the only real option for for Pope Innocent III to go to have all the vessels built, ships, etc. Mainly ships, because that's what they built, is ships. They're the Phoenicians, remember. Now, it was in the agreement there, i.e. what it was going to cost, this amalgamation for the Fourth Crusade, for them to build the ships, what they wanted in booty when they started outfighting and invading. But more importantly, they actually made it clear in there that although they were going to do this, they weren't actually specifying exactly what it was for. It was for wherever this army went. And then there were other agreements in that while this alliance lasted, they would have this other group of force in play to protect what were going on. Now, what pretty much happened straight away once that was agreed was that the Venetians went down and hit one of their prize opposition trading ports in Croatia. I think it was Zardo or something like that. Not satisfied with taking that over, they went and launched themselves down into Constantinople. And basically, what had happened from all the knowledge that had been removed from Alexandria before it were burnt were actually in the libraries in Constantinople. So the Fourth Crusade was basically a big jump and run for the Venetians to gain all the data from originally Alexandria. So you're looking at antediluvian, you're looking at all the Hermetica, you're looking at all these ancient texts that basically come back and undermine Christendom in its entirety. So then you're starting to get, you can start to see now why the Templars were so aboard. They had data, too much data, that were going to completely and utterly uproot the power structures of Europe. But it wasn't just the Templars, you know, you had the Teutonic Knights in there as well, and they seem to be wanting to find magical systems more than anything. Now that pans out and makes sense when you consider that the real dark occult as we understand it in this last 100 years was sort of birthed in Germany, wasn't it, for the Thule Society, eventually giving us the Third Reich and Hitler. So that makes sense. So each individual bunch basically were interested in picking up certain information, knowledge of old that they knew had been buried, but especially technological stuff as well. And the Templars, obviously, because they were in there first, and they basically dug under the temple and got that information, pretty much had an head start when it came to data in order to give them an advantage. And of course, another big thing that they're looking for were maps. Hence the reason why there's Templars, settling in the Americas, north of America, and setting up agreements with the Native Americans. And this is before, of course, the massive influx of the nut jobs from Europe to actually take it over. But originally, the first contacts between the East and West, between Templars, etc., and the Native Americans were cordial. Cordial, and lots of treasures were then hid across America, in Constantinople, Oak Island, all these places. There's some on now, isn't there? Some series where they're seeking treasure. Well, that's been moved. Apparently, there was another a stash of data in Lebanon, but that was sacked by Israeli government. So they again have more data. And this is what's been going on. The Templars must have held some serious data because they're the ones that hid it. They went out of the way to hide it. My presumption is to stop these other cycles getting hold of it. So in that sense then, you can understand why a lot of Templar stuff would be in agreement with a lot of people, especially at aristocratic level, why a lot of people are moved to think the Templars are pretty good. And maybe that's exactly how we were back in the day, I don't know. But there's certainly a lot of history post that time to show that they've also been involved in a lot of nasty stuff as well. So that's basically the backdrop to the Fourth Crusade, because after that, that's when things started to really change. All this data had been collected, and then there were battles and agreements, etc., based on the sharing of this data. So it was the Teutonic Knights, the Vatican, and the Templars, so that means Byzantium Rome, that actually signed off that deal with the Venetians so that they could go ahead and build their naval requirements, but also then gave the Venetians all this huge amounts of wealth, land in conquered lands, etc. So they really expanded their power base through the Fourth Crusade, whereas history only focuses into what the Templars were doing, etc. You know, so that's basically the backdrop to the Fourth Crusade and the beginnings of basically what we see as the Renaissance and the Enlightenment phases. This is when the Luciferians said to gain a bit of an open door and shoved out data. Cosimo de Medici, he gave us the Hermetica. That's why the Venetians hated him. So even though we've gone through the papal families, who are these black nobility families, even within the families themselves, and not all of them, are dark. And Cosimo de Medici is a prime example of a super powerful family actually doing something good. Because it already had the Vatican under its control in these times. It didn't need to attack the Vatican. So it didn't release the Hermetica specifically to undermine the Vatican. It could have done that because it controlled its purse. So that has to be taken into consideration as well. That obviously the Hermetica holds data. That if you're looking at it from the biblical perspective, you won't look at it because it's classed as evil, but really when you start to look at it, this is where we get a lot of our very interesting knowledge from. Then you've got the Theosophical Society who took that knowledge and besmirched it, my opinion, to keep it more in tune with the Kronos gang, the children eaters. Okay, so Hermetica Hermes, you've heard of Hermes, but ultimately when you get into the Egyptian side of things, it ultimately goes back to Tahuti, or as we know him today, Thoth. But Tahuti was the original Atlantean priest king who brought all this knowledge, the Hermetica, etc. That's where it actually originates. So again, it's white honky stuff. Anyway, never mind. So, so that covers that. Let's have a look. And a big way that the Venetians actually made even more money is the actual currency in play at the time was called. It was called the Hyperon, and the Venetians minted tons of fakes and were paying off everybody with all these fakes. I mean, these guys, you got to give it to them. They were smart cookies, or just everybody else were a bit thick. So now, why is the Vatican? Why is the Vatican with these black nobility? It's you've got to go back to Charlemagne, because from Charlemagne, he was crowned by King Leo as Augustus Emperor. Okay, so there's your first revamp of the idea of the emperors. Yeah, remember the fall of Rome, the church became the power, but then you start to see the military side come back through Charles Martel, Charlemagne. Pope Leo then crowns him as Augustus Emperor, and they have an agreement where the Pope will always hold up the Charlemagne and all his offspring, and in turn those Charlemagne and his offspring will always ensure the correct Pope is on the throne of the Vatican. So that was the first deal where you start to get the church mingling with the warrior caste. Now, that were done in 800 AD, okay, but it was only basically a title. It wasn't cemented. Hang on a minute. Wait a minute. Yeah, but it didn't hold full because it wasn't recognised by the Byzantine Emperor. But then Michael I in 1812 did recognise it, but only as a personal title, not as the Emperor of the Romans, because of course the Byzantine elite believed themselves to be the succession of the Caesars. So that's where they say the Caesar system went, and then in the West you've got the church system. Now by 967, Otto II, he actually became the Emperor of the Romans. And that point then, 967, basically was the point at which the popes became dictatable or dictated to by this military force, this military side of what we're building up on the back of Rome. And then of course you've got your Angevins, which are the Venetian bloodlines in France. So they've took over northern France. We call them the Normans. Everybody sees Vikings. These are Venetians. So 1066, Venice shifts them over. So they've got control of the Pope in 967. 1066, they send in the Angevin Normans to take over England. Now by 1095, Pope Urban II preaches a sermon that moved and began the Crusades. Take it, yeah? Now in 1152, so we've jumped, Crusades are going on, blah blah blah. But when we get to 1152, that position and relationship between the military and the church really picks up, because now 1152 the title of Holy Roman Emperor is created, and that's Frederick Barbarossa. So now you've fully amalgamated what was the church to this military system, or the Venetian system. So now you can see why the Guelphs supported the church, because it was behind it, it gained full control of it, and that now they had to remove Byzantine influence out of Europe, which was the Germanic races, the Germanic tribes, and that was the source and start of the battle between the Guelphs and the Ghibellines, or Welf as they're also known, or the Hohenstaufens was the Ghibellines. So that's where that kicks off, and in Europe then you've got Germany, now fully controlled, at elite level of course, by these Venetians aristocratics, which is why Germany, Frankfurt, is so tied in to this system. Now, so let's have another look. Where are we now on this? Okay. So we're up to 1152 on that. That's cemented. Rome, the church, is now controlled by the Venetians. And next up, we're going to see this battle between the Guelphs and the Ghibellines. Now, it starts to be described as a battle by 1240. And so you've got two factions. You've got those that see themselves Prometheus, Lucifer, which is Byzantine, and then you've got the Cronus side, Child Eaters, who have now took over the church, and are now trying to wipe out any power that the Luciferians have. And you're going to get what now? You're getting the knockdown of the Templars, because, but then it is. Hang on a minute, just let me. Yeah. So the Angevin influence in France, being the Venetians, remember, is why you see Philip the Fair and the Pope attack the Templars. And we know what happened after that. The Templars were thrust asunder all over the shop. So if you're taking it from the secret society's idea, then you're looking at the Templars as actually being the good guys back in those days. And they were actually, in hiding all the stuff, preventing the children eaters from gaining the knowledge that they took and didn't it. So when you see this Egyptian stuff found in the Grand Canyon, this is probably what's been found. It's one of these Templar hoard being hidden away for future finding. So now you can understand what, and Egypt saying why they've all been in Egypt looking for stuff, seeking and stopping people going in. They've done the same with Iraq. Now, once this war ended between the Guelphs and the Ghibellines, or the Hohenstaufens, the Guelphs themselves split into two. The Black Guelphs and the White Guelphs, right? And this was because the original shame began when, so one Hittite Flossie had been promised to the other side's geezer, but this side, he was that disgusted, he reneged on it, that hell came, and they started falling out. Somebody got murdered, blah, blah, blah. They were in opposition. But the real division came between two sets of offspring from one father, but two different females. One Bianca, one Mary. So the offspring of one were blonde-haired, white honkies, and the offspring from the other wife were dark-haired and dark-featured. And there begins the white v black. Okay, in the secret society world. Alright, so there's your checkerboard. Alright. So now you can see Dante. Yeah, Dante was classed as the white black nobility. Or, yeah, it sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? But this is how they work. This is how they're all. So the white side was, you could see Dante's thing. You can see that again in Shakespeare. Yeah. So it's still this division between the white and black Guelphs. Dante, Shakespeare, obviously claiming to be on the white side. Whereas the real dark monkeys that just wanted to kill everybody, kill them all. So you get that from when they were attacking them other geezers. I forgot the name at this minute, but you know what I'm saying. So there's your division from white and black. You've got white hats, black hats, haven't you, at the moment? Now I watched Riccardo Rossi the other day, and I had to listen because it was interesting what he said. And basically what he said is this: that back in the time of JFK assassination, 300 admirals and generals in America came together and knew they had a problem, because if the president could be knocked off, they didn't. America as a power wasn't being run as they even believed. So thus began the opposition to this insanity going on in America. Now, he said that this is what Q is. It's these boys. You've got them all running around. You've got military net. That's the other one I'm going to say about these blags that have gone on over this summer solstice. You've got all this silly movement going on, military in America. What is that going on? It's weird. You've got the Cube guys giving it the big, this is it, we're getting ready, blah, blah, blah. They have moved to impeach Biden, so there's definitely, it has teeth because he's now being backed with political moves. And basically what Ricardo's saying is that there is a division within not just the American military now, it's obviously happening in the Australian military. I don't know whether it's happening here in Blighty because we've been under these children eating brigade as commanders in our military since the Hanoverians came over here. Because of course the Hanoverians are who? Black nobility, the black girls, remember? And that's what Shakespeare were all about, showing. Now also that the Venetians, they controlled James I, so they basically gained full control of Blighty in James I, and I'm wondering if that's why the existing English really did start to rally, and maybe that's why we ended up having the Civil War. It wasn't so much that they hated Charles, because he was actually fighting enclosure, but if it was the English fighting the Venetians, they didn't do a very good job because Cromwell was fully controlled and financed by the same. And all this were allowed to go along because of General George Monk, again, operating for the Palafusini, black nobility. So you can see all these things where they sided out and said, it's actually the Venetians coming in with their imperial forces, attacking the natives, and then they whoosh it up in history to make it look like it's something else. And really, that's where we were being attacked. But we've gone through, haven't we? Palafusini controlling the Stanleys. Once the Stanleys had got the power here with the kingmakers, the Breakspears upped and left on behalf of the Holy See and went over into China. And then we have Palafusini funding Henry VIII, but through the front Stanleys. Then Elizabeth I, and then they destroyed everything, an idea of Elizabeth later on. And we got in. Now, this is another thing. The House of Orange has been cited as a part of this black nobility family. However, when you look at what they tried to do, Elizabeth and Mary, maybe that's how it began, but it wasn't how it ended. But then, of course, they had Anne fully under control, and she undid it by signing off the Act of Union and other things. So we can see it playing out. When you're looking at it like that, this is your secret societies going on. Yeah, but because anybody ever focuses to the church? It's not the case. The Vatican has been in sync with this for a frigging long time. Yeah, a long time. And we need to take that on board. It's important. Or at least the Holy See. Let's forget the Vatican, it's a plaything. But the Holy See has been in full control of this system, I'd say, from at least the 900s. Maybe even before. So there you can see that's the split in the black nobility itself. Now, I've said to you before that I know that each year, in between Christmas and New Year, the QE2 often hoity tights to Venice, parks up in the Venetian Bay, and all the elites come on to the QE2, and there they decide the coming year's agenda. That's then passed over to the Bilderberg Group, its steering committee, whose job it is then to call in everybody that's required from all avenues of power to give them the plan. That's the way it works. Now, this week it was also mentioned that Diana has mentioned this, that she was taken to one of these meetings, and that the Queen and all the aristocracy that were there were kowtowing to, guess who? Palafusini. Okay, and Palafusini, in my studies, appear to be one down from Farnese. Okay, Farnese is a very ancient Phoenician, Carthage, Roman bloodline. So Pallavicini, they were kowtowing down. So the entire English-British contingent, if you might say, were getting their orders off Pallavicini, which is fine. It is. So again, interesting stuff. Let me have a look here. But it's also important that people understand that France and Germany were one nation. Yeah, the Franks. But when that divided, it became France and Germany. Now the French early on were actually the good guys, and we're talking about in the days when Henry VIII had got on. So previous to that, the French, not the Angevins, the Normans, they were Venetians. The actual French themselves were the enemies of this system, the Venetian system. And in so the Venetians. Let me have a look here. So when we get up to 1400s, 1438 to 1445, this is when Cosimo, 1460, he released the Hermetica, translated. Yeah, before that he was translating the Plato's works. This is why the Venetians despised him, and also the church despised him, because these two works in and of themselves were going to undermine the then idea of Christendom. And once he released that, then we had the Renaissance, which again the Venetians quashed. Yeah, the next item you might say was the Reformation, although Luther was controlled by the Venetians. You can see that if you look at how he throws visceral against the Jews. You know, he did what he did, he cited what he needed to cite, but then aimed it. Put your attention, this is who it is. Like 9/11, it went down, it was Afghan cave. Afghan cave, believe it, durka durka, all that kind of stuff. Same thing. Yeah, they hit him, and then they point the finger when really that's not the case at all. So there you can see the nonsense going on with the Florentines, because they hated the Florentines. Now, you know, I have in the past come across data that suggests when the Lombardy collapsed, the Florentines moved to North Wales. Now, in the 1300s, that could be correct at all. So Cosimo Medici was the man that gave us the Hermetica, which is what the Templars hold dear, and also the early Masonic. Now, obviously the Masonic, I think the Masonic has been a plaything set up in Protestantism in order that all these orders and systems and societies can just come in and jump in whenever they want and move the Protestant energy to the will of the same. We the Protestants having a clue. Because you want to look what's happened to Protestants today, and they're being attacked. Businesses are being attacked today by Scousers, believe it or not, and Gypsies. So Protestant businesses are now coming under threat from this kind of stuff. It's happening, folks. It's happening right now. You need to be aware of this. It's not funny. You know what I'm saying? And the reason why the Protestants are left with nothing is because the Protestants joined Freemasonry. And that's why. This is the reason why we're in this mess. So we've covered that. I've covered my notes, I think. So yeah, I think I've covered my notes, and we can just continue to read this. But take it on board, you know. Also, that, you know, the East India companies, the model in and of itself are based on what was the Levant company set up by the Venetians. The Venetians have moved into Palestine. Yeah. And they set up the Levant company. The Dutch East India was set up in the same model, and then the British East India, or English East India as it was called first. Then you get the African company, all these offshoots for this. Nothing to do with England, nothing to do with Scotland, save for the fact the bloodlines lived in Scotland, so they're the ones that have been attacking the Aggie Squeezers. It's the British Empire, and they moved the naval and financial to London, and then the naval moved off to Washington. That's what they've done. And so now we're in a position where we're being told as white hats and there's black hats. And I mean, this is playing out whether we like it or not. And the fact that they've now moved to impeach Biden, then the narrative may have some reality to it. What it means, we don't know. But ultimately, there's not enough energy for the masses to do anything about this kind of stuff. It is looking more and more like this whole game is gonna be played out based on the militaries. I mean, Russia's just took such an embarrassed hit here. It's quite ridiculous, to say the least. It's insane what's just happened over there. Putin must be shitting bricks. So MI6, CIA, all these intelligence operations, I've said many times, are the intelligence services that came out of the East India companies. So we can now say clearly that they then are the Venetian intelligence services, all of them. And that's what ran all the opium, all the slavery. And the Arabs were already slavers, because Aryans have always been slavers and name stealers. The Venetians just pulled it together. So they're basically allowing them to do the thing, and they're capitalising on it and benefiting from it, of course. And now you can see the Third World War strategy. They're about, if they can get away with it, kick off the fanatical Islam Muslims and the fanatical Zionists. On England, on America, on Europe. You're right if it were fought over there where they all live and come from, but no. Here it comes. Why? Because Freemasonry's put the Protestant into Zionism. So, America, you're in a mess. You're in a mess. As are we all. You're not on your own, chaps. So it does cover my notes, that. But the reason why I want to put this forward is because we've covered ARC. Yeah? ARC Academies. All about the kids. Right? Paul Marshall. Now, Paul Marshall is just looking like a front. As potent as he is, because he's into everything, his wife is a debulkany. Now, we've been looking into these debulkanies. Here is where they are. This is where it's at, debulkanies. What a seriously strange bunch and these are. They're behind ARC. Who's the patron of ARC? Prince William. ARC connects to Dutra. That's not just child paedophilia, that's child murder. That's snuff. Yeah? All tied into Romania. Okay? Saxe-Coburg, this bunch. What is this acclaimed king about? He said it was going to be different, and people have no idea what that means. And I said flippantly when I did that live stream and brought in the book that he's took the oath to and kissed, snogged. Did he put his tongue on? I'm not sure. I didn't notice that. But surprised me. Probably does say, I will sacrifice every single flea bag I can get my hands on, as long as it's not one of mine. He's saying. That's him saying, of course. It's not looking good, folks, and that's what they're doing. So we have to wake the fuck up. We have to wake up to the fact that at the moment, by default, the Irish travellers have been sucked into this. More importantly, that's just setting up the rat runs in order this bigger system can come in and start doing its thing. Alright? So we have to pay attention. Militia mind. Okay? Protestants, forget it. There's nothing coming out of Freemasonry that's going to protect you. The opposite is coming. The opposite is already happening. Do not look to that. So that means you have to look at the field lodges if you're ex-military. Because they've got command of everything that we class as our military. Okay? In all its forms. At command level. It's important we start to think. Alright? Right. Hang on. For the human race, the Fourth Crusade was an unmitigated tragedy. The hypertrophy of Venetian power in the Mediterranean was one of the decisive factors in ensuring the later defeat of Emperor Federigo II of Hohenstaufen, King of Sicily. The Venetian puppet Latin Empire was overthrown by the Paleologs in 1261. But by that time, Federigo was gone. By 1266-68, Federigo's two sons and their Ghibelline supporters were defeated by Charles of Anjou, and the last representative of the Hohenstaufen dynasty was beheaded in the public square of Naples. The triumph of the Black Guelphs had become irreversible. Now, Edward I was an Angevin. So we have to start to see it this way. Building castles, what were we building them for? Was he building them for the Venetian system? You know? Now, Richard III, was it? He caused the collapse of the Venetian Empire when he said, I'm not paying you back. But even that, I think, needs a bit more looking at, because I think that's another trick. But I haven't looked at that. A further contributing factor in this tragedy was doubtless the Mongol hordes. At about the time the Venetians were sacking Constantinople, Genghis Khan ruled over an empire that extended from Korea all the way to Iran, and which was rapidly advancing to the west. Batu, a nephew of Genghis, defeated the Bulgarians in 1236, captured Kiev in the Ukraine in 1240, and swept into Poland. In Silesia, in 1241, the German and Polish feudal army, including the Teutonic Turks, was annihilated. Later in the same year, the Mongols defeated the Hungarians. The Mongols did not, for reasons that are not clear, advance further westward, but the Mongol Golden Horde, that imposed its hegemony over Russia was the beginning of Russia's economic and cultural backwardness. For some loosening of the Mongol yoke, the Russians would have to fight the Titanic battle of Kulikovo field on the Don in 1380. In these Mongol victories, there was something more than the numerical superiority at work, as one historian sums up the case. The Mongols did not sweep in wildly and suddenly like reckless barbarians. No, indeed they advanced accordingly to careful plan. At every stage, the Mongol generals informed themselves ahead of time about the state of European courts, and learned what feuds and disorders would be advantageous. Yeah, but they had Uzi in there, didn't they? The genuines had, what's he called in? Not with Genghis, but his son. What he called? So no, you can see them all working together. The Mongols are being used in this way as well. So this Eastern Empire, as I said, over Serbia, this merchant empire, it was building itself over there and then started to thrust itself. But because it's in this big block Siberia, you're not getting it in Chinese records, you're not getting it in European records. So everything that's gone on in that area that they said has been empty forever, I'm not so sure that that's the case. I think that's where everything has been built up in the past. The Mongols did not sweep blah 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 blah. This valuable knowledge they obtained from Venetian merchants, men like Marco Polo, that's it. It was thus not without reason that Polo himself was made welcome at the court of Kublai, and became for a time administrator of the Great Khan. So the great Marco Polo, the Venetian family from which he came, I'm sure he was genuine, was responsible for directing the destruction of Genghis Khan against Europe. The omnipresent Venetian intelligence was also a factor in the Mongol destruction of the Arab cultural centre of Baghdad in 1258. Frederick Schiller and William Shakespeare both analysed the manipulative methods employed by the Venetian secret intelligence establishment. Both considered Venetian intelligence one of the most formidable enemies, and much of Schiller's writing is dedicated in various ways to fighting the Venice-Geneva combination that had held the financial reins of King Philip II of Spain. Well, that's true, because in 14... where is this date? I've got this somewhere and I can't find it. So I'm missing something of these. Where is it? Oh, wait a minute. I'll tell you why. I have an extra page here and I forgot. But basically, when the Venetians were finally attacked, when France pulled in forces to attack it, the Pope was the player that prevented the Venetians from actually fully being destroyed. So they really are working with the Vatican, these popes from the Holy See that we've had for such a long time. But once they were attacked in Venice, they moved to Geneva, Frankfurt, Holland, and England. And that's why they spread out, yeah. But I have written it somewhere anyway, it's not there, so we'll forget that. Shakespeare's Othello. No, wait a minute. Frederick Schiller and William Shakespeare both analysed the manipulative methods employed by the Venetian intelligence establishment, both considered Venetian intelligence one of their most formidable enemies. Much of Schiller's writing is dedicated in various ways to fighting the Venice-Geneva combination that had held the financial reins of King Philip II of Spain. Shakespeare's Othello, the Moor of Venice, is a more finished analysis of the same technique. It was written and performed shortly after 1603 when the Venetians and Genoese had acquired vast powers in England through the accession of their puppet James I to the throne. Othello is a Moor hired out to Venice as a mercenary, and at the apex of his power, having just won a victory over the Turkish fleet attacking Cyprus. He enjoys the full confidence of the Senate and has just married Desdemona, the daughter of the patrician Othello. The erring barbarian, is however something of a dumb giant. His proficiency in the arts of war is unmatched, but his emotional makeup tends decidedly towards the naive and infantile. He has no real insight into affairs of state or into psychology. Above all, he is superstitious and has a propensity for jealousy. All of these weaknesses are systematically exploited by honest Iago, a member of Othello's staff who is determined to destroy him. Iago is the figure of the Venetian intelligence officer and expert in what he calls double knavery, the art of manipulation. He sets out to destroy Othello using an accurate psychological profile of the Moor, and exploiting above all Othello's naive willingness to trust his honest Iago. Iago's modus operandi is to make the Moor thank me, love me, and reward me for making him egregiously an ass and practising upon his peace and quit, even to madness. Iago uses his throwaway agent, the Duke Roderigo, for financing and services. He sets up scenes where he cons one participant with one story, briefs another participant with a different story, brings them together in a controlled environment, and exploits the resulting fireworks for his overall strategy. He sets up a fight between Roderigo and the drunken Cassio that leads to the wounding of Montano by Cassio, who is ousted as chief lieutenant by Othello. After this, he manipulates Desdemona's naive desire to help Cassio regain his post into prima facie evidence that Desdemona is an adulteress. Iago is then able to goad Othello all the way to killing Desdemona and finally himself. In the final scene, we can agree that Iago's wife Amelia and that Othello is a gull, an adult, a murderous coxcomb, as ignorant as dirt. But the lesson is not only Othello, but only those who love not wisely but love too well, who being wrought and perplexed in at the extreme are potential victims of Venetian intelligence. Now, I've covered what I wanted to cover, which is basically the battle that's going on between the secret societies. Also, they say there's a lot to show that a lot of agreements have been made, but in the past it must have been a much more severe division, because the Templars were hiding all the loot. Also, I came across while I were looking into this is this place that never gets mentioned, Scripps Research. And I came across it because it was tied to this Venetian system. But if you want to know what might be behind all this nonsense we've just had for the last 3 years, and I won't read it because it could trigger some of the algorithms, but I'll put it up, of course, after. You get into this to look for what's been running a lot of this shite that we've just had to witness and watch our fellow man destroy themselves. Also, now this is where France shows itself to be in complete opposition to this Venetian system, along with other allies, but that Britain or England, because you've got Henry on there, Henry VIII, working for the Venetians. That is a very good read to give you insight. So France, my old China's, in the old days, was a good egg. And unfortunately, it's been completely and utterly annihilated. So that's a very interesting read. It's only short, but it will really give you insight and support for what I've just been describing to you. So there is basically the gig for today that I wanted to get across. I hope that made sense to you, especially because we've just got this green magician, WF Muppet, claiming ascension to the throne of England, of Scotland. Not good. Really not good, I don't think. So, that's that. I'll just have a look at what you guys are saying. You can juice stinging nettle. Can you? Well, you got a font of wisdom there, Kel. Thank you. Graham beet on spenity ginger for joint pain. It cured my tennis elbow. It's brilliant stuff for that. It's an anti-inflammatory. So is turmeric. And so is propolis, which is the bees make it. So if you're really into, you don't want to get into garbage, fresh ginger, but you don't want to cook it, anti-inflammatory. Propolis, anti-inflammatory. Turmeric, anti-inflammatory. Mix them up. What have you got? Anti-inflammatory everywhere. So, when you consider most conditions, or pain, most pain, unless it's a broken bone, which even then it still is, most pain that we feel is inflammation. And it's meant to give us pain, so we know there's something wrong. Graham beat yeah. Kel, 6:30. Oh, you know, Kel. Freezing cold this morning. Well, we've had some rain up here this afternoon, but rest of Blight is still scorching. I'm quite liking this wind and rain shift because we're getting blazing hot, and then it pours down for a couple of hours and blazing hot. Now, that's like Europe. I like it. And I know that Europe's getting flooded out. Great. Do you know why? It's just making sure these UN Venetian military boys that are coming over on these little dinghies want to stay, making it on Blighty. Kel says the red light gives you mitochondrial energy to do what they normally do. Mitochondria slow down as you age, so it's just getting your body back to where you were when you were younger. And you're describing what you explained at the beginning, I see. Thank you for that. I've noticed that the abomination flag is the chocolate colours upside down. I've not noticed that. Well, you were right. I don't know what that's about. Hello, good evening, good afternoon, morning, one and all. How do you, Sean Moo Pit? How do you? Kel says, when the Romans took the fort in Palestine, Masada, and the last remaining people, leader, etc., a deal and went to Rome, that's where the rot started. Romans took the fort in Palestine, Masada. Okay, could be. Josie P. Flowers, a lot of interesting stuff as reference to source in that article. Yeah, that name came up quite a bit. Now back in the day, we used to profile some of these newcomers, and I'm not so sure whether this is the same guy or not, but we profiled a feral, and I can't remember whether it was this guy or not, so it might not be. I'll have to check. If it is, I'll find the profile and put it up, because we were on it right away then, and we saw what we need to see and put it out. Giza Death Star is his website. Okay, thank you, Kel. Cold stored in place of art, debt slavery, perhaps. Well, that's where we're heading, isn't it? Remember the Children's Crusade? Oh yeah, terrible. Exactly, it's all about. They have an obsession with your offspring. There's Medicis in my hometown, Mafia family. Yeah, but this is another thing to point, isn't it? They're not all bad. Cosimo is a prime example. Medicis, a family so bedded in finance, took over the Vatican Bank so it were controlling it, because they were indebted to it, and they'll give you popes. Yet, still, you get Cosimo. We have to start looking at this different, people. And I mean, I'm as guilty as ever, and anybody, because that's been my journey. But if you're only looking at this game from the eyes of the biblical tradition, you are missing everything. Because let's be frank about it. The only two games in play today is the Luciferian side and the child killing side. They've annihilated the path given to us by Yeshua or the Druids, the original gospel system. It's not in play anymore. Look at the state of what's going on with the Vatican. It's so up its arse. It couldn't be its opposite if it tried any harder. The only game on the table today, right now, is the Luciferians and the child killers. You know what? So, for instance, kill them all. Where does that cry come from? Well, child killers. Whereas the system that we had from the Norman time here, it were always moving to encourage people to create better. Don't create dark, create better. Is that what it's with Genesis 1? So what is this Lucifer? What is it really? Is it this idea that we get shoved down our neck all the time? You see, I always saw it as false text. Which it would be if the text that I'm talking about was written by a man fixed at this lower level. So if you're just fixed in the will side of it, pushing what you believe, then you're a negative Luciferian. The other side don't give a shit, they just want to kill everybody. Yeah. I mean, I can understand why they could think like that. Oh, why muck about with that? Just do it. What was it? Kill them all, God will know his own. Clearly, that Pope was of the child-eating brigade. Yeah? So we have to start, I mean, I know for most Christian people that call themselves Christians, and I've had a few emails about last week saying, what do you mean you don't know what a Christian is? Well, I don't, because I know a lot of people that call themselves Christians. But you only have to be in the company for a week or so, and you can see that every tenet offered by the Yeshua, they're breaking here, there, and everywhere. So that's what I'm saying. Just because millions of people call themselves it, are they? Is that what it is? No, I don't know. I think it's just people that claim it, but really haven't got a clue what it is. So I'll say it again. How can I claim that? Because I don't know what it is to be a Christian. I follow what I see as beneficial to me. Not because it's going to be me means prizes, land, conquer, or slavery. I don't want to enslave females of any perceived enemy. I have no intention of... But if you hold that in your heart, right, and a lot of people do, because they're copying. So if as a human being, a man, you hold in your heart that idea that you can look upon your perceived enemy and his women as, I'm going to have them, and I'm going to rape them, and I'm going to shag them, and I'm going to make them give me blowjobs all day, you really need to start to understand that you are the only danger to women. You, that mindset. Is it any wonder the universe manifests that onto your own wife through your will? If you hold that in your heart, the universe is showing you. Because you are the only threat to women in this world, nobody else. And on that bombshell, ladies and gentlemen, I bid you farewell. I bid you a good week, and I'll see you. Till the next time.
electronic